Hello, and welcome to this week's video on Jessica Recommends. I wonder if anyone can tell from my t-shirt what I'm going to be talking about this week, or, from the title of the video, whatever. But that's right, we're going to be talking about arguably the best Greek god, Poseidon, inventor of horses. So I got my little horsey earrings on, protector of sea turtles, have my little sea turtle bracelet. But just it was brought to my attention when I read the Percy Jackson books that if I had to have a Greek god as a parent, obviously Poseidon was the one to have. I love the ocean. I love horses. It's just a natural fit. And I got this t-shirt in Athens, not to boast, but it is pretty cool. I got it in Athens, and which is an amazing city, and had a really great experience there, and got to see all the sites that I've ever wanted to see, and did a whole summer, went around Rome and all those places, and my little mythology studying heart just about exploded, along with my little humanities and art studying heart just about killed me there in Rome. So, welcome to my video about books based on mythology. I'm a huge fan, have been ever since I was a wee child. In fact, here I have my mom's copy of Edith Hamilton's Mythology. I have my own copy that is newer, that does not say Kathy Day in very fine ballpoint pen there at the top. But I insisted a few years ago on taking this one with me because this is the one that as a kid I was fully obsessed with and read over and over again, to the point where when I first read Dune, I realized that they were descendants of the cursed house of Atreus. That's why they were the Atreides, and was so feeling so clever for putting that together because I read this. I had the there's little family trees in the back and all that stuff, and obsession does not begin to cut it. And so when I went to college, obviously my very first year at BYU, I signed up for a nothing but mythology class, just a solid Greek mythology class. Was so excited. And Professor Dukowitz, Norbert Dukowitz, was my professor. He was German, but if you asked him where he was from, he would say Provo and laugh. He was phenomenal, but the first thing he said was, I hope you haven't all grown up reading crap like Edith Hamilton. And I was like, oh, because she kind of, it's her paraphrasing, to be honest. Edith Hamilton is just like, and this is what Zeus did, and this is what Apollo did. And I especially love at the back, there's literally one chapter, just like a couple of pages on Norse mythology, because she was basically like, nobody knows what the heck is going on there, and none of their gods are very interesting or important. And that about killed me as a teenager. One of the times I was rereading it, and when I was getting into like Scandinavian culture and history and stuff, because it's like in my family and everything, I was like, excuse me, what? But yeah, it's kind of Edith Hamilton's mythology is what it should say on there. But oh, but I forgot. Here is what I'm reading this week before we dive in. So we're starting out. Edith Hamilton is great. It's fun if you just want to read through and kind of a quick and dirty overview of Greek mythology. This book is still around with better covers on it, and it is fine. But if you, like me, were obsessed with it when you were younger and you'd like to move on, we will do that now. But this week I am reading I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons by Peter S. Beagle. Book is phenomenal. I'm halfway through and I cannot stop. It's so great. And this is the special edition from Barnes and Noble, which is gorgeous with end papers and extra doodads and things in it. And I love it to pieces. Highly recommend. I'm listening to the audiobook of Termination Shock by Neil Stevenson, which is honestly kind of terrifying. It's about climate change in the near future. And as usual, Neil Stevenson is predicting the future and scaring the pants off of us with it. And I'm reading Wolfstalker aloud to my kids still, the mystery set in Yellowstone Park that I showed off, I think, last week. So that's where we're at. But now let's dive into mythology. So, along with being obsessed with Edith Hamilton, I started getting into historical fiction, or whatever you want to call it, that was based on mythology as well, and I am a huge Mary Renault fan. I have not read this one yet, and it's really funny because this is probably the only one I have never read. My mom thought that this title looked too weird and violent or something like that, and so I kept checking out from the library, not getting to read it. Now I have my own copy, and my mom's not here to tell me not to read it. So I'm reading it soon, but I do not own copies of my favorites, which my number one favorite that I recommend if you're dipping your toes into Mary Renault is The Bull from the Sea, which is the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. And I loved it so much. I don't know how many times I read it as a teenager. It's it's my favorite. So all of her books solid, except for I can't attest to this one. I'm assuming it is. It's considered her best. But The Bull from the Sea is my personal favorite. And then also in college, so Professor Dukevitz was there going, we're going to read the other stuff. We're going to read the originals. We read Ovid's. See, here's the problem with having a German professor teaching you Greek mythology, though. Ovid's Metamorphoses, the metamorphoses, I don't know how to say it without a German accent. And so yeah, anyway, all the stories of transformation from Greek mythology gathered together by Ovid, phenomenal. I can't find my copy. I know I have one here somewhere, but it's so good. It's the story of Daphne turning into the laurel tree. It's the story of Narcissus, like all those different stories, just really cool, really well done. And that was a really good one. And then I was obsessed with this as well. I was obsessed with the old movie Jason and the Argonauts, with the Harryhausen animations of the monsters and things like that. And the original story by Apollonius of Rhodes of the Voyage of the Argo is just as good, if not better, than the movie. A really fascinating, fabulous story about it's got everything I love. It's got sea voyages, it's got monsters, it's got all that cool stuff. That is a really great hero's journey. And then again, with the you will never learn to pronounce these things correctly. At the same time I was taking this mythology class for a German class, I was reading Cassandra by Christa Wolf. So I have literally no idea how to pronounce the names of anyone in Greek mythology correctly. Um, I'm like Achilles and Cassandra, but this novel, which is available in English, you do not have to try and read it in German, but this novel, which is the feminist perspective on the women during the Trojan War from the point of view of Cassandra, is at the time I was very young and dumb and was like, oh, she's just mean and hates everybody and stuff like that. No, it's it's a wonderful book. It's an amazing book. It's I would say if you're looking for sort of feminist literature to go here, so good. Loved it so much in retrospect and looking back through and picking out parts here and there and going like, I didn't really understand that then and my German wasn't as solid. And so I've gone back and read parts of it later and really gotten more into it and gotten a better understanding of how good this book is. So Cassandra by Christa Wolf. And of course, if you're gonna like Greek mythology, you gotta have the Iliad and the Odyssey. This particular translation by Fagles was considered the standard in like the late 90s, early 2000s. There are now translations by a female translator whose name I was going to look up because it just slipped my memory and I totally didn't, but there is a female translator who has just done the Iliad and the Odyssey, and they are supposed to be exceptional. But at the time, what I studied was the Fagles translation, and they came in this beautiful box set that I got later and loved them to pieces. They're so good. The Odyssey, because it's shorter and sort of more dynamic, is the one that a lot of people study in school, but I love the Iliad. I think it's amazing. And also, if you think about it, the title actually translates to Troy story. So it's funny too. But I actually prefer the character of Helen in the Iliad. She appears in the Odyssey and is kind of horrible, I think. But I do love Telemachus's journey. Odysseus's son's part of the Odyssey, I think is really great. But Helen pops up and is super weird, and I didn't care for that at all. But I do love the Iliad and the Odyssey. And then sort of trying to continue my own journey after college through mythology and exploring mythology titles that took my attention, I stumbled across this, Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, which is a novel version of the Cupid and Psyche story, which of course fascinated me because it's basically the exact same story as East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which you may know is my all-time favorite fairy tale. And it's a Norwegian fairy tale and written examples of both Cupid and Psyche and East of the Sun, West of the Moon have been found that are the same age. And so here was people on one side of the world telling this story, and then here are people on another side of the world were telling a similar story. And it fascinates me. Until We Have Faces is a gorgeous work. If you only know C.S. Lewis because of Chronicles of Narnia or the Screwtape Letters, you might want to try this. This is a really interesting exploration of this myth and really well written. And then, of course, Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. I mostly know Greek and Norse mythology. I will say that. That is a blind spot in my own reading. But Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology is a really fun look at Norse mythology. He lays it down. You can see he clearly loves the topic. The way he tells it is like having a professional storyteller tell you these stories. They are fun. They're well written. This is a really great book. And I think there's like illustrated versions and stuff now. Super fun. And of course, in my love of Norse mythology and all things Nordic, I had to get this. Joanne M. Harris wrote Chocolat, that became like the movie with Johnny Depp and Juliette Binoche. She also loves Norse mythology. She's written several books about it. This was my favorite, The Gospel of Loki. So fun. It is basically Loki's story from Loki's point of view. Really, really cool. Enjoyed it. Lots of tongue-in-cheek, very humorous and things like that. And then, of course, with my love of Norse mythology, you got to know who my favorite superhero is. Obviously, it's Thor, not just because it's Chris Hemsworth in the movies, but because Thor is a really fun Marvel superhero, and I have really enjoyed the adventures of him and his three companions and all that stuff. It is really cool. The one thing I do object to is the fact that sort of his ultimate villain, who turns into an ally, is named Beta Ray Bill. The 60s were a dark time in comic books. And if you don't know, and they kind of did this in the most recent Thor movie, which I did absolutely love, but eventually Thor is no longer worthy of the hammer, and he begins to go simply by the name Odin's son. And the hammer is passed on to a lady, the goddess of thunder, is the new Thor. And that comic run is really excellent. If you're ever wondering where to start in any comics, and if you're curious about Thor comics at all, I would go with Thor, the Goddess of Thunder. There are 3 books that are collections of the issues, and this is the first one, and it is superb. Rick Riordan, with his first book, The Lightning Thief, Percy Jackson, the Olympians, did an amazing thing. He did a phenomenally amazing thing, and I am grateful to him every day, because not only did he write a totally fun series for kids, tweens and up into teens, that they love to read, that's turned so many kids on to reading, that's given so many kids like so many hours of joy, and so many adults, but he's introduced Greek mythology to so many people around the world with these books. Like, he's made it accessible, he's made it fun, he's made it funny. Percy is a fun main character, all his friends, Annabeth, everybody is super fun. And I love this series. And I read it when it was first out in hardcover. I had just been working at a school. I just quit working at the school and had a baby. And one of the teachers at the school was telling me, she's like, oh, well, while you're home with your baby, you know what you should read? There's a new series starting, and it's so fun. It's about Greek mythology. I had to get it, and I have not been disappointed. I love the series. I love that he then went on and was like, all right, let's cover the Roman myths and what are the aspects of the gods when they are the Roman gods. And it fascinates me because Poseidon becomes Neptune, Zeus becomes Jupiter. Their whole character changes and everything about him. He does it so well. He interrupts this, kids high school drama or summer camp or whatever with accurate portrayals of the gods if you've read the myths, and I love it so much. And then he's back with Percy, by the way. If you didn't know, a new series just started. The second book's about to come out, and they are just as good as the first ones. I think his writing got better and better over the Percy Jackson, the Olympian series, and now he's just really having fun with it. I think I liked this better than most of the original series. It was the same character, so it's kind of a continuation. Love it. And then, of course, he did my absolute favorite thing. If you can guess what my favorite Rick Riordan books are. Ding, 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 that's correct. Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard were absolutely my favorites, though. Percy is kind of a hapless character. He never seems to know what's going on. He's just like, oh, what? That's a god? Oh, right, there are myths. Magnus Chase is super streetwise, and I love him for it. He's a teenage boy who's been living on the streets, whole situation with his family and his backstory. So he's very savvy. So when stuff starts happening to him with the Norse gods, and he's claimed as the son of a Norse god, he takes a hit and comes up fighting. Basically, he takes everything in stride. He knows what he's doing. They seem a bit darker than the Percy Jackson books and more real, and the side characters are more kind of darker, grittier characters and stuff. Yet at the same time, a lot of it is super fun. There's some really funny stuff going on in here. The weapons are sort of sentient and stuff, and he has a magic sword, and his sword like goes on dates with lady weapons and things like that. And it is so delightful. And yeah, I was so invested in him and so in love with his character from day one, where I'm like, nothing can happen to this precious baby because he's already been through so much and he's trying so hard. So the Magnus Chase books were hands down my favorite. I loved them so much. And then Rick, Uncle Rick, as he is called online, he kept going for us, and he started his own imprint. And you've heard me talk about the Tristan Strong books. Highly recommend. So this, to me, I always say, like, to the kids, oh, look, it's the seal of quality. So Rick Riordan Presents is his imprint, where he is basically highlighting other cultures' mythology. He is letting other people tell these stories. So here is Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Malia. And here is like African American folklore, African gods like Anansi the trickster, like in an American setting, as they would have been with the descendants of enslaved people from the South and things like that. And just so good. There's modern twists on it. Of course, the main characters are modern, but they've got all the old folk tales, Brer Rabbit, and then the gods like Anansi, like mingling with like modern concerns, dealing with racism and things like that they deal with today, as well as dealing with these older stories. And it's so good. But yeah, Rick just keeps finding these amazing authors who were already well known for something, a lot of them, and things like that, and going like, hey, would you write something from your culture? And I love that. Serwa Boateng's Guide to Vampire Hunting. And I truly apologize if I am not saying people's names correctly. That is on me. I'm doing the best I can. But by Roseanne A. Brown, who is a delightful person, as well as being a phenomenal writer. And this girl, her family they are a long line of vampire hunters and monster hunters from Ghana. And so she's got this whole magic system that is partially based on like real like Ghanaian lore, but then also she's sort of like Rosie's given it her own twist. Really fun middle grade series about a middle school girl dealing with going to school for the first time, even though she would rather just have her weapons and be fighting these vampires and things like that. And they are not vampires like Count Dracula vampires. They are weird, creepy, scary spider things. Was the Newbery winner from a couple of years ago, The Last Quintista by Dana Barba Higueroa. Science fiction, really unusual, middle grade book, but honestly, very, very tender, very emotional. This girl who she and her family are going up into space. They're some of the last people able to leave the Earth as the Earth is dying. And she wants to be a professional storyteller. She has gathered up all the stories from sort of the American Southwest that her abuelita has told her, and she wants to hold them. She's a quintista. It's sort of like a storyteller, but also like a memory keeper. And she wants to be the one to hold these stories and then tell them to other people. And so, what she is going through in her present, which is our future, she is getting through it on the strength of knowing these stories and turning to these stories for comfort, for advice. It's a really beautiful, really tender book, and also really amazing science fiction. Um, And by the way, speaking of the seal of quality, I have to admit, even though I love stuff about Egypt, I have owned this box set of Rick Riordan's Egyptian trilogy, the Kane Chronicles, for probably over 10 years, probably since they first came out, and haven't gotten to them yet, but promise I'm going to soon. So, little confession, have not actually read those yet, but really want to. Um, True story. The Hunger Games, the very first one, was inspired by Theseus and the Minotaur. Just think about that story for a minute. Just think about having to send 7 daughters and 7 sons every year as a tithe to this king as reparation for a war. Full disclosure, I do not own D'Aulaire's book of Greek myths and had never heard of it until a few years ago when I found the Norse myths that had just been put up by the New York Public Library's like special editions. I was in love with this and had to get it, obviously. They also did the Book of Trolls. They've also done the story of Leif the Lucky, and love these sort of groovy, very 70s looking illustrations and stuff. And they also have done the Greek myths. And so there's sort of something out there for everyone, a little beyond Edith Hamilton, a little bit more saucy, sort of in the vein of Neil Gaiman taking on Norse mythology. We have Stephen Fry's Mythos. Stephen Fry, you know, the actor and bon vivant, I guess we could say, novelist. He does a rundown of all the major Greek myths, all the gods and goddesses, who they are. Very, very sort of sassy, tongue-in-cheek, little bit naughty at times, because the stories were, and he pulls no punches with it. Really enjoyed this though. Very fun. And of course, a gorgeous book. I mean, heavy paper, gold on the outside, you know, it's fancy. So if you're looking for a really nice fancy rundown of the myths and you want to go a little more in depth than good old Edith, you could do worse. You may not be able to do better, frankly. Also, an adult looking for something a little fun and a little bit saucy, Lore Olympus. If you don't know about this, this is a web comic. This is the first collection of Rachel Smythe's web comic, the story of Hades and Persephone. So good. I am so super addicted. I love her art. I love everything about it. She is in depth exploring. We are up to like volume 6 now, and look how thick these suckers are. And this is the thinnest one. But we are exploring in depth the story of Hades and Persephone. They are gods, they are immortal. So the thing of it is, Hades, the underworld, is basically like a big corporation. They have phones, they have dating apps, all this stuff. But then when they go down to the mortal realm, it will be sort of ancient Greek times, because that's what they're living through right now. But of course, as gods and goddesses, they have access to anything that's ever going to be invented or has been invented. It is so fun, but is definitely not for kids. I thought maybe it was for teens or something like that when I first checked this out from the library way back in the day, and immediately handed it over to my then like 13-year-old daughter and was like, oh, here on the way home you could start reading this on the way home. And she looked at the first 2 pages, she goes, nope. She's like, I think this is for adults. And I'm like, oh, okay. I hadn't read it yet, and there was some swears on the very first page, and then she kind of flipped through it and saw like people making out, that's about, I think, as far as it went. And she was just like, I think I'm a little young for this. And I read it and then I'm like, you are too young for that. So it is for adults. Um, but also, speaking of stuff that is for adults, this book, Household Gods by Judith Tarr and Harry Turtledove. If you don't know, Harry Turtledove is mostly known for his alternate histories. He has done if the South won the Civil War, if the Axis powers won World War II, that type of thing. And is mostly known for that type of thing. Judith Tarr is known for some really phenomenal fantasy, a lot of stuff that has horses big in it. She did a series that was all very historically accurate to the early Crusades, but had characters in it who are basically fairies, like the type of fair folk under the hill type of thing from England going to fight in the Crusades. And I absolutely love that whole trilogy and all the books, Hound and the Falcon and all those. And then they collaborated and did this, where a woman in modern times prays to a little, what she thinks is a little statue, a little junky statue of a god and a goddess that she picked up on her honeymoon in Rome. All of her life is falling apart, basically. Her husband's left her. She just didn't get a promotion at work, blah, blah, blah. She's having a big drink of wine by herself in the kitchen. She takes a slug, she pours some of it over this, what she thinks is a touristy, like knockoff idol, and it turns out to be real, and wishes she had a better life, and ends up way back in the body of one of her ancestors in Rome during the time of like Marcus Aurelius, and lives there for months. It is so fascinating. There's so much research into what life back then would be like. And there's just sort of this brief intervention of the gods. So it's not really heavy on fantasy. It's more of a historical fiction. But she's got her modern perspective of like, why are they doing this? So what about that? And things like that. And I really love this book. She also has done a whole bunch of books about different Egyptian characters. She has a book about Alexander the Great from the perspective of an Egyptian woman who is an oracle, a seer, whatever, however you want to call that. She basically knows that they need Alexander's help for something. Of course, I can't find that book in my big mess behind me, but I did find King and Goddess, which is the story of Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh. This is absolutely wonderful. Usually her touches of magic in books are very light. This is just sort of like, the hand of the gods and goddesses are upon Hatshepsut as she takes over the throne, but it's sort of like everything we know about that female pharaoh in a nice novelized version that is fun to read. Same thing with Lunar New Year love story, in that it's not like overtly like a fantasy and stuff, but there's just hints of mythology and sort of a supernatural element to it that I really loved, by Liwen Pham and Jean Luen Yang. This is a graphic novel suitable for teens, even quite young teens, that is about two kids meeting and sort of getting together over their love of lion dancing for the Lunar New Year, like being in the big lion costume and stuff like that. There's a lot more to it, but that's sort of like the core of it. And I really, really love this. This just came out in the last year. It's gorgeous and highly recommend. My daughter also read it and she's very picky and she loved it as well. Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulet. I don't know what to tell you. It's so good. This is one of my favorite books from the last few years. Won the Prince Award and quite a few other awards, but about a girl in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan Upper Peninsula, and her heritage, Ojibwe, and just the things that happen to her and the way she honors her ancestors and the way she thinks about their stories and things like that are so beautiful and so well done in this book. And just, I just love it so much. So the actual mythology aspect of it is probably pretty light. Don't care, read it anyway. Firekeeper's Daughter, everyone should read it. So good. Back on my Norse mythology, though, Loki's Wolves, saw this at a bookstore one day, absolutely had to pick it up. Kale Armstrong and M.A. Marr, and got it, started to read it, happened to flip to the end or the um, author info and realized that this is Kelly Armstrong and Melissa Marr, and they did their names like this because they mostly are known for writing upper YA and adult books, but they wanted to do a middle grade book for their kids because both of them have sort of a Nordic backgrounds and they love Norse mythology. And this is a super fun sort of look at Ragnarok in the modern day. Like, how do the descendants of the gods, how are they actually going to deal with Ragnarok in their small town? And it is really cool. It's a trilogy. It's complete now. So fun. Absolutely loved the Blackwell pages. American Gods by Neil Gaiman deals with all the gods from so many cultures, people I had never heard of and things I did not know were a thing. And Nancy, leprechauns, Odin. I mean, everybody is in this. Like, everybody's in this. And whether or not you like Neil Gaiman now or have issues with him, this book is just really, really good. And this is the 10th anniversary edition, which has some like extended bits in it and things like that. It is pretty hardcore. I know people that did not get past like a couple of chapters in. It is quite high on the, I hate to use that stupid, everyone says spicy, because it's not spicy, because it's not supposed to be like, ooh, how naughty. It's like, there's some real graphic stuff in here, and it is in there sort of for shock value, and then also sort of to show how these are not the cute and fluffy types of gods. This is not like, oh, I'll make flowers grow in your garden, or oh, I'll bring you a pot of gold. Like, this is the real story behind a lot of those myths, and I love it. So, and then speaking of hardcore, Melvin Burgess, young adult author from England. I hesitate to kind of say these are young adult. They are about teenagers, but you want to talk about hardcore and graphic, good. Hannah. So Bloodtide and Bloodsong. Bloodtide is based on the Norse myth of oh, for the love. Of course, I'm going to forget. It's based on one of the sort of lesser known sagas. The gods intervening in the lives of this family and these twins and their rivals. And it's sort of like a very, very early Romeo and Juliet type of story. This is set in the future. And yes, the gods, Odin comes and interferes in the lives of these people to set them on the right path to prevent humanity from being completely wiped out. It is very violent and real gross, even at times, and I loved it. So then there is a second one dealing with the aftermath of the first one that happens about 20 years later, called Bloodsong. And this is Sigurd and Gudrun and Brunhilde in a post-apocalyptic future setting. Basically, they're sort of post-apocalyptic, futuristic, set in England. And this one was actually my favorite, Bloodsong, because that is a story that I know, like the defeat of Fafnir, the big dragon. Obviously, I know that story, Brunhilde, and all those things. This one is so good. If you have a strong stomach, they are real gory. And so that's why I say, like, it's kind of funny because they're sort of marketed as YA and they are about teenagers, but wow, you have to have a strong stomach to read these. So, but I love them and they're so good. So just know your own limits. Okay, not every book is for everyone. If you don't like that kind of thing, you're under no obligation to read it just because I recommended it. But if you're like, but Jessica, you've shown us all these books and not once have you said Diana Wynne Jones. Haha, saved it for the end. Diana Wynne Jones, 8 Days of Luke. Luke is an alias. Can you guess which god from Norse mythology, it might be, who is using the name of Luke. That's right. It's Luke. This book is super fun, and I have to admit that I was so far into this book before I caught on to what was going on and who Luke really was. I feel dumb, and I was an adult when I read it, but this is a really fun one. This is a way old, very 80s cover, but don't let that deter you. I'm sure there are better covers out there. 8 Days of Luke, really fun. That's your moment of Diana Wynne Jones for this week, and go out and enjoy some mythology.